It is almost the end of the first week of Ramadan, a time when Muslims focus on their faith, communities, and self-growth. Our Dan Burritt spoke with Rumee Ahmed, a professor of Islamic law at UBC, about why it's important.
Rumee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rumee, the term halal-haram ratio is sometimes used to define how Muslims navigate what is allowed and not allowed, at least according to Islamic guidelines. How does that relate to Ramadan?
Well, there's no clerical hierarchy in Islam, so everyone kind of has to figure out how to express their religiosity in ways that they feel are best, that best express themselves. And, one way that people do that is through ritual. And everyone has their own kind of ratio, I suppose. There are people who fast the entire month of Ramadan, but who don't necessarily pray. There are people who are comfortable with sex outside of marriage, but don't drink. Everyone has their own kind of ratio. And one of the nice things about Ramadan is that you'll get people in the mosque who you'll never see any other time of year. There are people from all different kinds of walks of life with different relationships to their religion. And you'll see them in the mosque, you'll speak to them in the mosque, and everyone will be the same. It's kind of a special time.
It sounds like quite a diversity there. How does interpretation of Islamic law or the guidelines of prayer and fasting change as communities change?
Islamic law is changing all the time. That's part of the nature of law itself, whatever kind of law you have. When you're rooted in a community, part of the community's, its history is based on the fact that it has a past, and you want to root yourself in that past and in that community. But the community has to remain relevant throughout times and places. So, there might not have been any Islamic laws on tweeting or halal dating until the last few decades. But as times change, laws adapt and laws change to go with it so that you feel like you can live in the modern world, but also be rooted to this past and this community.
Now, some people, as we know, use Ramadan as the month of the year for them to prioritize their faith in a way they may not during the rest of the year. You mentioned that perhaps you would see somebody at mosque or temple that you wouldn't normally see. Is there a right or a wrong way to do this?
I mean, some people would say, yes, there's a right or a wrong way to do that, but that's part of the diversity of the Muslim community. There are people who believe that there's only one right way to be Muslim, and there's other people who believe that there are many different ways to be Muslim. Probably, just to give you an example of the diversity in the community, probably the largest theological school in terms of adherence, the Hanafi school of law, believes that there's no connection between faith and law. So doing good deeds doesn't make you a better believer. Doing bad deeds doesn't make you a worse believer. Everyone is equal in terms of belief. So it doesn't really make sense to speak of good Muslims or bad Muslims, but that's not everyone. Some people believe that that's wrong. And that's part of the nature of being in a community, is that you have all these different diverse voices.
And how do you think non-Muslims can support Muslims during Ramadan, however they're interpreting it?
I tell you, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of Muslims in my school, and I was usually the only person who was fasting. And it's hard, and you especially when people all around you are eating and enjoying themselves and drinking, but it attunes you to the fact also that not everyone is eating and drinking, and some people are going hungry. And in this time, I think it's important for us to be mindful that not everyone is food secure. There are indigenous communities without clean water. And so I guess if I had to say one thing that they could do to support is to kind of make this a mindful month where we all reflect on those who maybe don't have as much as we do, and those who, to make it a time of reflection and of action to make sure that everyone is food and water secure.
Rumee Ahmed is a professor of Islamic law at UBC. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you. Take care.